Okay, so I watched the Madagascar trilogy the other day because they were removing some of them from Netflix by the end of the month, and now all I want to do is talk about the Madagascar movies. I had this whole list of videos we were going to do for the rest of the month, but fuck it, we're talking about Madagascar now. Okay, so one thing I've always noticed about Dreamworks is that their movie trilogies are reasonably consistent in quality, in that for some reason the second one is always an improvement over the first, usually by a pretty wide margin, but then the third one drops off pretty hard. Kung Fu Panda, right? The original was pretty good. The second one has no right to be as much of a banger as it is. And the third one is okay. Shrek, of course, goes from great to cinema and then to Illumination level for the last two. I haven't seen any of the How to Train Your Dragon movies in a bit, but I recall thinking the first was great, the second one was even better, but the third one was So now we know the real reason why they never made Megamind 2 was because they just couldn't figure out how to make something better than the first. So I was very surprised that after rewatching them, that I found the only time this rule gets broken is with the fucking Madagascar movies. Because in an absolutely unprecedented move, the first is good, the second is better, but then the third one is still really good. Not quite as good as the second one, let's not get carried away here, but it's nowhere near as much of a drop-off as usual. Now, again, I'm saying all of this with the Madagascar movies being the only Dreamworks features I've seen in like the past 6 months, but still, the Madagascar movies are more consistent in quality than Shrek. How did this happen? And I am so glad I can say that the second one is my favorite unironically, so I don't have to pretend just because Moto was in it. So, going through the movies one by one, Madagascar 1 is actually the only one I hadn't seen before of the three, and I was surprised to find how quaint this one is in comparison. The first follows 4 zoo animals who manage to escape captivity to try and explore what the outside world is like, only to be captured and then shipped off to be somebody else's problem. Having only seen the sequels where they go all over the fucking place, I kind of appreciated that the only things that happen in this movie are like, there's a bunch of animals in the zoo, they break out, they get shipped off to Madagascar, and they meet King Julian. Like, I just wasn't expecting it to be as small scale as it was when I'm used to them fucking destroying half of Rio in a high-speed car chase. I think it just really goes to show how completely off the rails it gets by the third movie. Though that's not to say the first Madagascar movie doesn't immediately set the stage for the insane breakneck energy that this entire trilogy has, because they do introduce all of the best parts of the other movies here. The penguins and King Julian. Julian being the sort of mascot of the Madagascar series for a while, thanks to his iconic rendition of the pop classic I Like to Move It, Move It.
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it.
If you were like 6 to 10 years old in 2005, then you probably heard this every fucking day. He's voiced by Sacha Baron Cohen. And originally, Julian wasn't even supposed to be a big part of the movie with only a couple lines planned, but they were so impressed with his audition that they turned him into a major character. And good thing they did, because I honestly could not imagine Madagascar without him. I feel like if you weren't a fan of King Julian, then he'd probably be your Dreamworks equivalent of the Minions. I think what makes him work so well is the trio that he's a part of with Maurice and Mort, which is fueled purely by their hatred of one another. Maurice is of course his right-hand man, who I'm pretty sure is secretly plotting to kill him. And Mort, I don't really know what Mort is. I'm sure he has his own horrible reasons for being there.
Good night, sweetie. Didn't I tell him about the fit?
He did tell you about the feet.
One thing I was not prepared for was how fucking annoying Alex is in this movie. It's like they gave Ben Stiller a ton of cocaine and then put him in a mocap suit and then animated it. There's like very few scenes where he's not doing 20 backflips or talking for 10 minutes straight. This is something they definitely toned down in the sequels, which is why those ones are better. But Alex probably still would have to be my least favorite part of the Madagascar movies. Night of the Museum will always be the superior Ben Stiller-G. Madagascar 1 doesn't really have much of a villain either. I mean, there's the Fusa.
The dreaded Fusa.
The Fusa attacking!
Or maybe you could even say that it's Alex, since he spends the entire last 30 minutes trying to eat Marty's ass. Really, the real villain here is humanity. That's deep, Madagascar. They do introduce in this one of the greatest cinematic rivalries of all time between Alex the Lion and this random 87-year-old woman who assaults every single living being she comes into contact with. The penguins, which are the best thing ever put in any animated movie ever made, are used as sort of like a B-plot that they cut to every now and then, which they do across all 3 movies. But I don't think anyone would disagree with me if I said that I'm mainly watching it for the penguins.
Well, this sucks.
It is hilarious that they contrast them against the main plot where the characters like develop and go through conflict and all that. And then you just have these four complete lunatics just plowing their way through any situation with zero effort whatsoever. The designs definitely take some getting used to though. A lot of DreamWorks' earlier movies tried to go for a more stylized but uglier appearance for their characters, which I think they do manage to pull off a bit better in this than say like ants. I think some of the faults of the original film stem mainly from them overusing a lot of reference humor, as well as I said before, the coked out Alex, but it's still great overall, and definitely set things up for them to improve with what was to come. I think if I got anything out of the first Madagascar movie, it's to be more immersed in nature after witnessing its beauty firsthand in this film. So, okay, we're at the zoo now, we're gonna go find them. They gotta be here somewhere. It's Ben Stiller. As you might expect with a movie of this caliber, Madagascar 1 opened to very favorable reviews when it first came out, and was actually the very first animated movie to ever make $1 trillion at the box office, which they then used to buy an island to name it after. But that still didn't stop DreamWorks from then spending the next 3 years coming up with one of the greatest sequels of all time, Madagascar: Escape to Africa.
Wow. Would you look at that?
This one takes from the foundation laid by the original and adds like a surprising amount of like... The word I'm looking for is depth, but I don't want to say it because it's a fucking Madagascar movie. Coming off the back of the first movie, the opening of this is like a huge tonal shift where we see Alex as a kid get kidnapped by poachers and his dad gets fucking shot in the head, which is meant to set up the events of the rest of the movie as well as explain why he ended up at the zoo. Usually I find when sequels suddenly add in all of this backstory that wasn't even mentioned in the first one, it can kind of feel tacked on, but I think the first Madagascar explains so little about its main characters that it kind of worked for me. I know it came out after, but it reminds me even of Kung Fu Panda 2, where they used the sequel to sort of expand on the main character's previously unmentioned backstory, even if it had no relevance to the first one at all. Which, now that I think about it, both involve them being torn away from their parents as a child by some undefeatable tragedy that they later grow up to defeat. I cannot believe Madagascar 2 is so good that even DreamWorks ripped it off. Anyway, I've spent enough time pretending to care about any other aspect of this trilogy. Now let's stop the video to talk about one of the greatest characters in any movie ever made. Gloria's love interest of the movie, Moto Moto. Damn. I kind of get it now. While they're in Africa, because there are a lot more than 4 animals this time, they each have their own little side story that all come together at the end. Alex reconnects with his parents and basically goes through the plot of The Lion King. I've never seen The Lion King. And they do have a proper villain in this one, Alec Baldwin's persona, a character archetype that would be shamelessly ripped off by The Lion King 1.5 several years before. Marty assimilates into the zebra population and finds out that it sucks because the entire species is the result of generations of inbreeding.
I always thought I was a little bit unique.
We are unique.
Melman becomes a doctor for the entirety of every animal species in Africa before being told he has a terminal illness and attempts to commit suicide via offering himself up as a sacrifice to unseen higher beings. But it's Gloria that has the most layered one of them all because she goes to Africa with the sole intention of wanting to get laid.
When we get back, I might just sign up for the breeding program.
And it's also in this movie that they suddenly introduce that Melman wants to move it with Gloria, and that becomes his entire character arc in the movie, even though there was absolutely no mention of it in the first one at all. The penguins have my favorite subplot of the entire trilogy here, where they spend nearly the entire runtime trying to rebuild the plane that got them there, which they do by abusing the monkey population, which all sets in motion a series of events that leads up to the film's climax.
Plane won't be fixed until the suits meet our demands. Now, about maternity leave.
Maternity leave? You're a male.
In order to get parts for the plane, they hijack a bunch of cars from tourists. And after a single day of them being stranded in a foreign country, they immediately create their own civilization, which causes them to build a dam, which takes away all of the water in the entire continent. So really, when you look at it, every other character in this movie, except the penguins, are entirely inconsequential because they are the only ones guiding the story along, and everything happens as a direct result of their actions. And I mean, shit, it was the penguins that gave Marty the idea to leave the zoo in the first place in the original movie.
Hey, hold up! Where is this place? Tell me where it is!
You didn't see anything.
The conflict between Marty and Alex in this one is that Alex is revealed to be a huge racist and can't tell him apart from the other zebras in the herd. But by the end, he learns how to identify him because he bit him on the ass in the first movie. I don't I'm not really sure what they were going for here. I think what makes the comedy work so well in this, and the third one especially, is that everybody just seems to go along with whatever is happening. Like, Julian's solution to the drought problem is just to throw somebody into the fucking volcano as a gift to the gods, and everyone is just like, yeah, why not? I think what I like so much about Escape to Africa is that it feels to me like everything from the original was improved here, from the visual quality to the writing, the character arcs, and Alex. What Dreamworks did really well, especially in their earlier years that set them apart from everyone else, was their penchant for including dark humor. And I think the Madagascar movies have to have some of their best examples of this.
We bozos have the people, of course.
They're up there.
Oh, that and the excessive amount of adult jokes.
I love it, Melman. I love it.
Yeah, I wanted to give you something personal. You know, that was my first rectal thermometer.
Okay, yeah, Disney, you can talk about foot size and be as subtle as you want, but Gloria literally spends half of Madagascar 2 openly talking about how horny she is. Then, another 4 years later, they closed out this iconic trilogy with Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, the greatest sequel to a film since Madagascar 2. In order to effectively raise the stakes this time, they introduce a villain who is on the same power level as the Penguins, and it makes for some of the best scenes in the movie because neither of them ever seem to give a shit at any point about what's going on. The first 30 minutes of Madagascar 3 are easily its best, where the four think that the Penguins have abandoned them in Africa, so they swim all the way to Brazil out of spite and then break into a casino, which causes a car chase through the city that results in about $1 trillion in property damage. Don't get me wrong here, Madagascar 3 is still very strong overall. I'd say it's almost as good as the second one, but it doesn't have Moto Moto in it. It's okay, a lot of movies have that issue. It definitely tries to do the most when compared to the other two because they introduce this circus element where they meet up with a group of performers and gaslight their way into being friends with them.
We're, relatively well known.
But Alex is really the star.
Well, I wouldn't say star, more like, well, star.
I think ever since the first movie, because they've introduced all of these other characters, Marty, Melman, and Gloria aren't left with all that much to do, so they kind of just get sidelined for the worst character of the three. Fuck you, Alex. Thankfully, King Julian still gets plenty of screen time.
No?
No.
Okay?
No.
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 Near the end, they finally make it back to the New York Zoo, which was pretty satisfying to watch after 3 nights of Madagascar in a row. But if you were watching these when they came out in the cinemas, then this shit took them 7 years. Something that I kind of love is that the Madagascar series does not spend a lot of time exploring the rules of its world. The best we really get is the ground rule that humans cannot understand the animals, but for some reason, the animals can understand the humans. Why does every animal speak English, even in non-English speaking countries? Why do the animals know how to read human languages? Why does not a single person question that a bunch of escaped zoo animals not only know how to fly a plane, but also have clearly done so enough times that they know how to mount a rescue operation?
Move over, Miss Daisy.
What are you doing? Zebras can't drive. Only penguins and people can drive.
None of this is ever acknowledged, and that is amazing. And even though it's not a part of the trilogy, I also watched The Penguins of Madagascar. World's biggest Madagascar fan, what can I say? The one where they hired Benedict Cumberbatch to be one of the main characters, even though he's the one person on the entire planet who can't say the word penguin.
Well, I suppose we can't all be penguins, can we?
Penguins of Madagascar. This was Dreamworks' attempt to make an entire movie out of the best part of Madagascar 3, but it goes completely off the rails with the gadgets and sci-fi stuff, and honestly, I think it gets a little bit too ridiculous. I prefer when my Madagascar movies are grounded in realism, please. The problem with the Penguins now taking center stage is that it meant they had to give them emotions and character arcs, and I much prefer them when they're just these unstoppable forces of nature. You can't give the fucking Batman of the Animal Kingdom a love interest. Come on, Dreamworks. They also really depower them in this one, calling complete bullshit on them getting hit by that laser. Rico would have vomited up a portal gun or something. It is really interesting that the Penguins are easily the best part of the Madagascar movies, but then when you isolate them in a story on their own, it's shown that they don't work as well as when they're not the central focus. I guess maybe it's a case of too much of a good thing. Like, you really need all of this other stuff to make the Penguins stand out more than the movie where they are literally the standout. I swear to God I'm trying to be genuine, but these movies are impossible to take seriously. It's not bad or anything, but I just don't think the Penguins are as good here as when they're with the other four. So it does make me kind of sad, Madagascar, that we probably aren't getting that fourth one now. Thanks, Will Smith. I think to do another one anyway would kind of defeat the purpose of 3, since they technically achieved their original goal of wanting to get back to the New York Zoo, only to find out that it kind of sucks. To do another one would be like a Toy Story 4, where it only exists to make me more depressed. I think they kind of tied things off really nicely in the 3rd anyway. Like, it's really nice and sweet. But I still would really like to see these characters again. No, not like that. We haven't had a mainline Madagascar movie for 10 years. No wonder I haven't felt happiness since 2012. So yeah, to summarize, probably the greatest movie trilogy ever made. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next Madagascar video. Okay, so I watched the Madagascar movies the other day because they were